It was a quiet Saturday evening in the town of Lafayette, the kind of place where nothing really changed. People still went to church on Sundays, farmers still opened their shops early, the wealthier folks still gathered at the old country club for dinner and drinks, as they had done for generations. The club was one of those places built before anyone could remember. Large white columns stood at the entrance, a long chandelier sparkled in the center of the dining hall, and the walls were lined with photographs of past members, almost all of them white men in suits, smiling proudly in black and white. Angela had been working there for just over a month. She was 26, slim, quiet, and always polite. She never spoke unless she had to, and she wore her hair pulled back in a low bun. Most of the other staff liked her because she worked hard and never caused problems. She didn't gossip, didn't complain, and didn't ask for special treatment. She needed the job. Her mother had passed away 3 years earlier, and her younger brother was still in school. Her father, once a mechanic, had stopped working after his heart attack. So Angela carried the weight silently and showed up on time every day, no matter how tired she felt. That evening, the dining room was full. The club had invited its regular members for a wine tasting and live jazz music. But the band had canceled last minute, leaving the manager nervous and frustrated. There was still soft music playing from the speakers, but it wasn't the same. Some guests had already begun to whisper complaints. Angela had overheard bits and pieces of their comments as she moved from table to table, pouring wine and collecting empty dishes. At table 9 sat Mr. Calhoun, one of the oldest and wealthiest members of the club. He was nearly 70, with silver hair and a permanent smirk on his face. He owned several properties in the area and liked to remind people of it. Everyone in town knew him, and most avoided disagreeing with him. He had a reputation for being rude, sometimes cruel, especially. After a few drinks, he called waiters by snapping his fingers, laughed loudly at his own jokes, and always tipped just enough to keep people quiet. That night, he had already had 3 glasses of wine. His voice was louder than usual, and the people sitting at his table, 2 older men and 1 woman, laughed along, even when his jokes were uncomfortable. Angela noticed him glancing at her a few times as she passed by, and she could feel that uneasy stare, like someone watching a bird in a cage. The grand piano stood near the far corner of the room, close to the bar. It had been there for years, more as decoration than anything else. Sometimes, when a live band played, they used it. Most nights, it sat untouched. It's polished but silent. Angela was wiping down an empty table nearby when she heard Mr. Calhoun call out, "Hey, you there?" he said, pointing at her with a crooked finger. She looked up, startled. "Come over here for a minute," he added. His voice carrying across the room, Angela walked over slowly, holding the cleaning cloth in her hand. "Yes, sir," she said softly. Mr. Calhoun leaned back in his chair, grinning. "We're all getting a little bored here. No music tonight. Can you believe that?" he said, turning to the others at his table for agreement. They chuckled politely. "Now," he continued, "I see you've been hanging around that piano over there. Tell me something, do you know how to play?" Angela looked confused. She hadn't even touched the piano that evening. "No, sir," she said quietly, her voice tight. "Oh, come on," he said. "I think you're just being modest." More eyes in the room had turned now. Few guests were watching, unsure of what was happening. "Let's have some fun," Mr. Calhoun said, his tone playful but with an edge. "Go on over there and play us something. You must know a song or two." Angela froze. Her hands gripped the cleaning cloth. She looked at the manager near the bar, hoping for help, but the manager only gave a small nod, as if telling her to just go along with it. The other staff had stopped what they were doing. The room had grown quiet. Even the background music seemed to fade as everyone waited to see what she would do. Angela didn't want to play, not like this, not in front of these people, not as a joke. But she also knew how these situations worked. If she said no, it would become a problem. Mr. Calhoun might complain to the manager. She could be written up, or even lose the job. And she couldn't afford that. Not now. So without saying another word, she turned and walked slowly to the piano. Her hands were slightly shaking as she sat down on the bench. Her back was straight and she could feel dozens of eyes on her. She didn't look at anyone. She kept her eyes on the keys. Her fingers hovered above them, silent for a long moment. Mr. Calhoun laughed again. "Come on now, don't be shy." Angela took a deep breath. For a few seconds, she didn't move. Then very gently, she pressed a single key. A soft note echoed. Across the room, she pressed another, then another. Her hands, once trembling, began to move with more purpose, and then without warning music filled the air. It wasn't just sound. It was feeling. It was memory. It was something deeper. The melody was slow at first, thoughtful, almost sad. Then it picked up, turning into something stronger, richer. She wasn't just pressing keys. She was telling a story. Her fingers flowed. Over the piano like water, over stones smooth, fast, and filled with emotion. People stopped chewing. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A waiter near the kitchen door stood still, mouth slightly open. Angela played with her eyes closed. Body swayed slightly with the rhythm, and her expression softened. She was no longer a waitress. She was a musician, a storyteller, a daughter remembering every lesson her mother had ever given her. The song shifted again, this time into something bright, almost joyful, with hints of jazz. It made some guests tap their feet without thinking. Others leaned in closer, drawn to her skill. Their expressions slowly changing from curiosity to awe. Mr. Calhoun said nothing now. His smirk was gone. His fingers, once drumming on the table, were still. I stared at Angela as if seeing her for the first time. When the final note faded, the silence that followed was louder than any applause. It hung in the air like smoke. Angela stood up slowly. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply walked away, returning to her duties as if nothing had happened. It was a moment no one expected. A moment that felt like a quiet storm had. Passed through the room soft, but powerful enough to leave everyone changed. In that silence, before the clapping began, there was something else. Something heavy. Guilt, maybe, shame, realization, or perhaps just deep respect for a woman they never thought to notice until she forced them to see her not with words, but with music, and in that moment, the joke was no longer funny. It had turned into something else entirely. After Angela walked away from the piano, the room stayed quiet for a few more seconds. Then, like a slow wave, people began to clap. It wasn't loud or forced. It was honest. Some guests clapped politely, some clapped harder, but many didn't know what to do. They had never seen anything like that before, especially not from someone they had barely noticed all evening. Angela, the quiet waitress, had just played like a professional, and they were still trying to understand what had happened. Angela didn't look back. She picked up her tray and continued clearing dishes, just like any other night. Her hands were steady now. Her face was calm. But inside, her heart was racing. She hadn't played like that in years, not since her mother died. She didn't expect to play that night, and certainly not in front of people who thought she had nothing to offer except food and water. But something inside her had told her not to walk away. Something had told her, play. Let them hear who you are. Mr. Calhoun, who had started it all, didn't clap. He sat back in his chair with a strange look on his face. His smirk was gone, and now he looked more like someone who had just been hit with a truth he didn't want to face. He took a long sip of his wine and said nothing. The others at his table looked around awkwardly. One of the men tried to make a joke, but it fell flat. Nobody laughed. The manager, who had watched everything from the bar, seemed a bit nervous now. He didn't expect Angela to actually play, and he definitely didn't expect her to play like that. He walked over to her quietly and said that was ... very good. Unexpected, but good. Angela just nodded and went back to her work. The rest of the night moved slowly. The guests stayed quieter than usual. People spoke in soft voices. A few came up to Angela and told her how beautiful her playing was. One woman even apologized for the way Mr. Calhoun had treated her. Angela smiled politely, but didn't say much. She just wanted to finish her shift and go home. When her shift ended, she walked out the back door, like always. The night air was cool, and the parking lot was almost empty. She got into her old car, placed her hands on the steering wheel, and sat still for a moment. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She didn't cry, but her eyes were wet, not because of sadness, not even because of anger. It was something deeper. She felt proud and a little scared. She had shown them something they didn't expect, and now nothing would be the same. Angela lived in a small apartment with her father and younger brother, Marcus. When she got home, the lights were off, but Marcus was still up, playing a video game in the living room. Looked up and said, "Hey, you're late." Angela smiled. "Yeah, had a weird night." She told him everything what Mr. Calhoun did, how the manager didn't stop it, how she played the piano, and how the whole room went silent. Marcus sat up straight, his eyes wide. "You played? Like really played?" She nodded. "Man, I wish I was there. I haven't heard you play since Mom." Angela looked down at her hands. "I didn't even think I could still do it. But when I sat there, it all just came back." Her brother was quiet for a moment, and he said, "Mom would have been proud." Angela felt something warm in her chest. That was all she needed to hear. The next morning, she woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop. At first, she thought something was wrong, but when she checked, she saw dozens of messages, missed calls, and notifications from apps she didn't even use that much. One of the guests from last night, a woman named Rebecca, had recorded her performance and posted it online, along with a long caption describing the whole scene. She wrote about how Angela had been forced to play as a joke, how the man who asked her expected her to fail, and how the entire room had been stunned into silence when she played with so much beauty and soul. The post had gone viral. It had thousands of shares, comments, and likes. People were writing things like, "Powerful moment. What a legend. She turned an insult into art. Much respect. I want to hear her play more." Some people were angry about Mr. Calhoun's behavior and called for the club to make a statement. Others wanted to know who Angela was, where she learned to play, and how they could support her. Angela couldn't believe it. She had lived her whole life trying not to be noticed. Now the whole internet knew her name. Later that day, a local news station called her. They wanted to interview her. She said no at first, not wanting the attention. But they were kind and respectful, and after talking to her father and brother, she agreed to meet them at the park for a short interview. The reporter, a young black woman named Jasmine, asked her simple questions about her background, her love for music, and what she felt that night when she sat at the piano. Angela answered honestly, "I didn't want to play. I felt like I was being laughed at. But then I remembered my mom. She used to say, 'Never hide your gifts just because others can't see them.' So I played. Not to prove anything, just because I had something inside me that needed to come out." The interview was aired that evening. People loved it. Her calm, humble way of speaking touched everyone. She wasn't trying to be famous. She wasn't angry or dramatic. She was just real. That night, Angela received dozens of messages from musicians, teachers, and even strangers offering encouragement. One message stood out. It came from a woman named Cynthia from New Orleans. She ran a music foundation that gave scholarships to talented young people who couldn't afford music school. Cynthia had seen the video and wanted to help Angela. "We'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our music academy." The message read, "We believe you have something special, and we'd love to help you grow it." Angela read the message twice, then a third time. She didn't know what to say. She showed it to her father, who read it silently and then hugged her. "You've earned this," he whispered. Angela couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed thinking about her mother, about the piano they used to have in their old house, before they lost it, about all the nights she had practiced while her mom cooked dinner in the kitchen. She remembered the way her mom would stop, lean against the doorway, and smile with pride. And now, somehow, the music that had once filled their home was opening doors to a new future. At the country club, things were different too. The manager called her into his office and told her that they had received several complaints about Mr. Calhoun. The club didn't want any more incidents. They said they were reviewing their code of conduct. It was the first time Angela had seen anyone take responsibility. Mr. Calhoun didn't return to the club after that night. Some said he was embarrassed. Others said he had been asked to leave. Quietly, Angela didn't care. She wasn't looking for revenge. She didn't even want an apology. All she wanted was to be respected and to move forward. In the following weeks, Angela continued working at the club, But now things had changed. Guests treated her with more kindness. Some even asked her to play again. A few nights later, the manager invited her to perform officially on a Friday evening. She agreed. This time, it was her choice. That Friday, the dining room was packed. People came just to hear her. She wore a simple blue dress and sat at the same piano. But now, the energy was different. She wasn't being laughed at or tested. She was being welcomed. She played with confidence, with passion, and with peace. Her music filled the room and the hearts of everyone inside it. This time, when she finished, the applause was loud and full of joy. Angela smiled, and for the first time in a long time, she felt seen not as a waitress, not as someone to mock, but as a person with a gift, a voice, and a story that mattered. The applause that filled the room after Angela's official performance was not just clapping, it was something more. It was a sound filled with respect, surprise, and quiet admiration. People didn't just hear music that night. They felt something deep inside. Many of them had seen her before, passing their tables with a jug of water, clearing their plates, or quietly saying, "Is there anything else I can get you?" But now, she was something more than a waitress in a black apron. She was an artist. A soul that had stayed hidden in plain sight. Angela stood up slowly from the piano bench, looked at the guests with a soft smile, and gave a small nod. She didn't need to say anything. Her music had already spoken for her. The guests stood on their feet one by one, applauding with warmth. Some even had tears in their eyes. They didn't know her story, not fully, but they had heard it in every note she played. After the performance, many people came to talk to her. They wanted to know where she learned to play. A man in a gray suit asked if she'd ever recorded her music. A woman in a floral dress told her she reminded her of Nina Simone. Angela didn't know what to say to all the praise. She had spent most of her life being ignored, her voice small, her presence unnoticed. Now, all of a sudden, people wanted to know who she was, but even as people clapped and smiled, Angela felt something else inside her. It wasn't doubt or fear. It was the memory of that first moment when Mr. Calhoun had asked her to play, not out of kindness, but as a joke. That night had changed everything. But she couldn't forget how it started. The laughter, the mockery, the look on his face when he thought she would fail. She didn't talk about him to the guests. She didn't bring up the insult or the humiliation. She just let the music speak, and it did louder than any argument ever could. After the crowd left and the club began to empty, Angela sat in the break room with a cup of tea. Her coworker, Jenna, a young woman with curly red hair and a loud laugh, sat beside her. "You were amazing," Jenna said. "I had no idea you could play like that." Angela smiled. "Not many people do." "Seriously," Jenna continued, shaking her head. "I was standing by the kitchen door, and even the cooks stopped working. One of them dropped a pan. It was like ... magic." Angela chuckled. "Thank you." Jenna leaned closer. "I know. You don't like talking about it, but that night when Mr. Calhoun made that joke, it made me so angry. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how." Angela looked at her. "It's okay. I didn't expect anyone to speak up. I've dealt with worse. You shouldn't have to," Jenna said quietly. Angela nodded but didn't respond. She knew Jenna meant well, but this wasn't new. Being black in certain spaces meant knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It meant carrying dignity in places that didn't always give it to you. And sometimes the only way to fight back was to show them what they never expected, to let your talent speak in a language they couldn't ignore. The next week brought more surprises. The video of her first performance continued to spread online. A music professor from New York emailed her, saying he had watched the video 10 times and wanted to meet her. A group of local students asked her to come to their school and talk about her journey. Even people from other countries messaged her, thanking her for showing grace in the face of cruelty. But the biggest moment came when a woman named Claire Barnes, famous concert pianist, reached out. She had played in halls all over Europe and taught at one of the best music schools in the country. She had seen the video and said Angela had something rare, raw emotion, natural rhythm, and storytelling in every touch. Claire invited Angela to spend a weekend at her home studio to learn, play, and just talk about music. Angela was shocked. She had never imagined meeting someone like Claire, let alone being taught by her. She told her father about the invitation, and he smiled with pride. "Your mama would have danced around the kitchen if she heard this," he said softly. Angela nodded. "I still hear her sometimes, you know. When I play, she's there," her father replied. She never left. Angela traveled to Claire's home 2 weeks later. The house was beautiful, with large windows, wooden floors, and a grand piano in the center of the living room. Claire was kind and warm. She didn't treat Angela like a waitress or a student. She treated her like an equal. They talked about music for hours, about the way each note could tell a story, about the silence between the keys. Claire didn't try to change Angela's style. She helped her understand it more deeply. "You don't play like someone who learned from books," Claire said. "You play like someone who's lived every note." Angela smiled. "I guess I have." Over the weekend, Claire recorded one of Angela's sessions. It was a simple piece, half jazz, half gospel, but filled with emotion. When she posted it online, people responded immediately. They wanted more. Some called her the soul pianist. Others said she reminded them of artists from another time, when music wasn't about fame but about truth. Angela returned home changed. Not because she had become famous, but because she had been reminded of who she truly was. Her gift was not just about skill. It was about story. It's about pain and hope and memory. And now she was ready to share it more widely. Back at the country club, the mood had shifted. Staff treated her with more respect. The manager offered her a new position, less time waiting tables, more time performing in the evenings. Angela accepted for now, but she knew she wouldn't be there forever. Her world was growing, and she could feel it. One night, during a quiet performance, she noticed someone sitting at the back of the room. It was Mr. Calhoun. He looked different, not smug or loud, just quiet, watching. He didn't say a word. The entire time, he listened as she played, his hands folded, his face unreadable. After the performance, he stood up slowly and walked toward the door. For a second, it seemed like he would leave without a word. But then he stopped, turned around, and looked at Angela. "I didn't know," he said. Angela met his eyes. "You didn't care to." He looked down. "You're right." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," he added. "I was wrong." Angela nodded. "Yes, you were." We gave a small nod and left. Angela didn't feel joy from his apology, but she did feel peace. Not because he said sorry, but because she didn't need it. She had already moved forward. It was part of her story, but not the center of it. It was just a shadow in a chapter that had turned into something beautiful. As the months passed, Angela's life changed even more. She was invited to perform. At events, churches, and music festivals, she recorded her first album, just her and the piano. No big band, no fancy production, just truth. It sold well. People said her music helped them heal, helped them sleep, helped them cry. Angela never forgot where she came from. She visited her mother's grave often, leaving fresh flowers and sometimes sitting there quietly, humming old songs. She taught piano at a local community center for free, helping kids who reminded her of herself, quiet, unsure, but full of fire inside. Her younger brother, Marcus, proudly told everyone at school that his sister was famous now. Their father, though still weak from his heart condition, smiled more these days. Their home, once quiet and heavy with sadness, now felt warm, again filled with music, laughter, and life. Angela had turned a moment of shame into something powerful. What was meant to humiliate her had become the very thing that lifted her, and all of it began with one painful moment, one rude demand, and one simple choice to play. She didn't just play the piano that night, she played her truth, and the world finally listened. Angela had come a long way from being the quiet waitress in a black apron who served water and cleared plates. Her life had started to bloom like a flower that had been stepped on but refused to die. Every day brought new messages, new requests, and new people who wanted to know her, hear her, or work with her. But in the middle of all the excitement, Angela stayed grounded. She still woke up early, still made breakfast for her father, and checked on her little brother. Fame hadn't changed her heart. It had just given her a voice. The world finally listened to. Even though she had been offered scholarships and invited to perform on larger stages, Angela still played at the country club once a week. She didn't do it because she had to. She did it because that piano in that room was where everything had started. It was her reminder of where she came from, of what had happened, and of what music could do even in the most unexpected moments. Every Friday night, the lounge area filled up with people who wanted to hear her play. They weren't the same. Faces who used to ignore her, new people, came musicians, students, teachers, old couples who held hands while she played soft melodies, young artists who sat cross-legged near the back just to feel inspired. Some of the regular guests who once looked down on her now clapped with real respect. They knew they had been wrong. They just hadn't known how blind they were until her music opened their eyes. Angela often wondered how something so hurtful being, laughed at and forced to play could become something so beautiful. That one moment had made her stronger. It had made people listen. It had given her a key to doors that were once locked to her. And now, with each passing week, she was walking through those doors, not with pride, but with purpose. One evening, after her performance, a woman approached her. She was older, with white hair and soft eyes. She introduced herself as Ruth. "My daughter saw your video online," she said kindly. "She hasn't stopped talking about you." Angela smiled. "Thank you, that means a lot. She wants to learn to play the piano now," Ruth said. She said, "If that lady could do that even when people didn't believe in her, maybe I can too." Angela felt something stir inside her. That was the kind of thing that mattered more than fame or applause. Inspiring someone, giving hope. Where there wasn't any before? After that, she decided to start something she had been thinking about for a while, a small music class for children in her neighborhood. She talked to her local community center and offered to teach for free every Saturday. At first, only 4 kids came. They were shy and nervous, just like she had once been. But week by week, more children joined. Angela brought her old keyboard, and sometimes she let the kids take turns playing real songs. Even if they hit the wrong notes, she didn't just teach them music. She taught them confidence. She told them stories. She reminded them that no matter where they came from, their voices mattered, that they didn't need anyone's permission to shine. At the same time, Angela began working on her first full music album. She didn't want it to sound fancy or fake. She wanted it to feel like truth. It's like sitting in your grandmother's living room while the rain hit the window. It's like walking through pain and still finding something beautiful in the dark. She called the album Unseen Light. She recorded it in a small studio downtown with a team that respected her vision. She didn't want auto-tune or heavy beats, just her, the piano, and honest melodies. Each song told a part of her story, one for her mother, one for the night she was forced to play, one for the children she now taught, and one for all the people who had ever felt invisible. When the album released, it didn't become a chart topper overnight, but it reached people who needed it. Comments poured in from strangers who said her songs helped them sleep, helped them cry, helped them feel again after years of being numb. Angela read every message. One night while reading, a letter from a teenage girl in Detroit who had been thinking of quitting music until she heard Angela's story, began to cry. Not from sadness, but from something bigger purpose. She was making a difference, and that's all she ever wanted. Meanwhile, the country club had changed too. After the public backlash from the original incident, they had been forced to examine themselves. They began diversity training for their staff. They welcomed more musicians from different backgrounds, and they added a section on their website where they shared stories of the artists who performed there. Angela's name was at the top of that list. Still, not everything was easy. Angela had her moments of doubt. Some people whispered that she didn't deserve all the attention, that she only became known because of that incident. Some blogs called it the Waitress story, and Angela hated that name because she wasn't just a waitress. And her story wasn't just about being humiliated, It was about what she did afterward. She reminded herself that people would always talk. What mattered was staying true to her music, her values, and the people who believed in her. One day, a music festival in Atlanta invited her to perform on their main stage. It was the biggest crowd she had ever played for. Thousands of people. She was nervous, but she remembered her mother's words. Never hide your gift. She walked on stage with calm steps, sat at the piano, and closed her eyes. The first note she played was soft, like a whisper. Then another, then another. Within minutes, the huge crowd became quiet. No shouting, no phones flashing, no distractions. Just silence, respect, and feeling. She played the same song she had played the first night at the country club, The One. That had silenced the room. This time, it wasn't played for the people who laughed at her. It was played for the people who had been told they didn't belong, who had been mocked, ignored, or underestimated. Every note was a promise. You matter. You are not invisible. You are music, even when no one is listening. When she finished, the crowd stood and clapped. It was the biggest standing ovation of her life. Backstage, she was greeted by artists she had looked up to. One singer hugged her and said, "Girl, you've just healed the whole crowd." Angela smiled. She didn't need anything more than that. As the weeks passed, she was invited to speak at schools, music colleges, and even at events about equality and race. She didn't pretend to have all the answers. She just told her story, about growing up with very little, about losing her mother, about serving people who looked through her like she wasn't there, about being asked to play as a joke and turning that moment into her beginning. At one event, a young man asked her, "Don't you wish that never happened to you?" Angela thought for a moment. "Yes and no," she said. "Yes, because no one deserves to be humiliated. But no, because that moment showed me who I am, and it reminded the world what talent looks like when it's ignored for too long." She never mentioned Mr. Calhoun by name, not because she was afraid, but because this wasn't about him anymore. It never was. The world tried to reduce her to a joke, but Angela turned herself into a song, and the world listened. Angela's name was slowly becoming known not only in her town, but in other cities and countries too. What had started as a painful and embarrassing moment in a fancy dining hall had now turned into a powerful journey of truth, talent, and change. She had not planned to become famous. She had not asked for the spotlight. But somehow, through one act of unexpected courage, she had walked into it with quiet strength. It had been almost a year since the night when Mr. Calhoun forced her to play the piano in front of everyone. Angela remembered everything about that moment. The laughter, the uncomfortable silence, the pressure in her chest, the way her fingers shook just before she played the first note. Back then, she was just trying to survive a moment of humiliation. But now, looking back, she understood something deeper. That night had been a test. She had passed it not by fighting or shouting, but by letting her music speak for her. Since then, many people had asked her the same question. How did she feel about that moment now? Angela always gave a calm answer. She would say, "It wasn't a good experience, but it led me to something greater, and for that, I'm thankful." Some people didn't understand how she could forgive. Others said they admired her grace. But Angela knew that carrying bitterness was like holding a heavy baggage. Couldn't go far if you didn't learn to let it go. Angela had now finished her second album, titled Still Rising. This album was even more personal than the first. Each song told a chapter of her life. One song was about the nights she used to walk home from the country club in silence, wondering if life would ever get better. Another song was about her mother's hands, the way they moved across the piano, the way they cooked, the way they comforted. There was a song for her little brother Marcus, two about their late-night talks, about his laughter that made even the worst days feel lighter. Still Rising reached people in ways even Angela didn't expect. It didn't just get shared online. It got reviewed in music magazines. Critics called her an artist who turns pain into poetry and a voice of quiet revolution. But Angela didn't let praise go to her head. She still taught piano to children at the local community center. She still visited her mother's grave once a week. She still made tea for her father in the morning before he watched his favorite old Western movies. One day, Angela got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short note written in shaky handwriting. "I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't see you clearly back then. But now I do. You reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. Thank you." See, Angela stared at the letter for a long time. She didn't need to guess who had written it. She folded it carefully and placed it inside a small wooden box, where she kept other things that had changed her life, her mother's old ring, the first program from her live performance, and the original paper napkin where she had scribbled her first song idea. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Some apologies didn't need answers. Some wounds had already healed on their own. As time went on, Angela's music became a part of people's lives. It was played in quiet cafes, on radio shows about hope and healing, and even in therapy centers for people recovering from trauma. One day, a woman who had lost her husband wrote to Angela, "Your song helped me cry when I couldn't cry. It helped me sit with my pain and then slowly rise from it." Angela would often sit by her window at night reading these letters. She kept every one of them in a box. To her, these were more valuable than money or awards. It reminded her that she was not just playing music, she was touching lives. And that meant more than anything. One evening, Angela was invited to play at a national music event in Washington, D.C. It was a big deal. She would be sharing the stage with some of the most famous names in music. People expected her to bring a band, to perform a dramatic, powerful song. But she arrived alone, wearing a simple black dress, just her and her piano. When the lights dimmed and she walked onto the stage, the audience didn't cheer loudly. They just watched, waiting. Angela sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play the same melody she had played the very first time at the country club. It had changed slightly over the months, deeper in emotion, fuller in rhythm, but the heart of it was still the same. As she played, the giant hall went silent. There were no backup singers, no flashing lights, no loud drums. Just one woman, and her story told through keys and chords and pauses that said more than words ever could. When she finished, the room stood in applause. Not a single person stayed seated. People clapped with tears in their eyes. Some shouted, "Thank you." Others just stood quietly, hearts full. Backstage, Angela met other performers, some of whom had followed her journey from the beginning. A famous jazz musician shook her hand and said, "You didn't just play music out there. You reminded us why we started making music in the first place." Angela smiled and said, "I just play what I feel." A few months later, Angela's life took another turn. A music school in New York offered her a teaching position. They wanted her not just as a performer, but as someone who could teach the emotional side of music, how to play from your soul, not just your fingers. Angela accepted. She moved to the city, but she kept close ties to her hometown. She still visited her family often, still sent messages to her students back at the community center, still replied to fan letters with handwritten notes. In the classroom, she became a favorite among students. She didn't focus only on technique. She asked them questions like, "What story are you telling?" And "Who are you when you play?" Some students cried during lessons. Some found their voice for the first time. Angela didn't just teach them to play piano. She taught them how to believe in themselves. One day during a lesson, a quiet girl who had always sat at the back finally spoke up. "Miss Angela," she said, "how did you keep going when people didn't believe in you?" Angela looked at her gently. "I remembered the one person who always believed in me, my mom. I carried her voice with me, even when everyone else was silent." That day, the girl played for the first time in front of the class. She was nervous, and she made mistakes. But Angela clapped the loudest. Years passed, and Angela's name was written in books, taught in schools, and used as an example in speeches. But she never lost the quiet girl inside, the one who once stood in front of a piano, scared and unsure, forced to play as a joke. That moment had once hurt her. But now it had become a part of her power. She didn't become great because of it. She had always been great. That night had simply revealed it to the world. Angela never sought revenge. She didn't argue. She didn't try to destroy the man who tried to shame her. She simply created something more powerful than hate. She created music. And in doing so, she showed everyone that dignity once challenged can rise with even more strength. She showed the world what it means to turn darkness into light, silence into sound, and cruelty into art. Angela's journey reminded people everywhere that even when the world laughs at you, underestimates you, tries to make you small, there is still a fire inside you that no one can put out. And when you find the courage to let that fire burn, the whole world watches and listens.